So I know I'm going to learn something tonight. So again, Diane said we want to welcome you to our term kickoff, right? Wish you the best of luck in your teaching endeavors this term. I always love these because I always learn something new, and then I get to meet some of you. Thank you personally for being such wonderful instructors and supporters of the faculty. As we know, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So thank you very, very much. And I'm going to hand it over to my instructional design colleague. I'm a designer myself. So Diane and I have known each other for a long time as practitioners, right? And also as researchers and now as professional colleagues. So put your faith in her and the team. They're great.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, Katie was one of my first supporters when I was a young academic with an almost shiny PhD, and she saw something that she thought she might like to work with. So it was a lot of fun. It was one of my first times in Alberta, actually, to come and work with you and Heather Kanuka. So why use video in your classroom? And that's a question you might have, depending on whether or not you are actually somebody who has a face-to-face classroom, so you're working on your 1 or 2 or 4 day model. You also might be teaching as well using an online method or another kind of blended method. So you say to yourself, why would I want to do that? So my job today is going to talk a little bit about the pedagogy of why you would do it, give you a little tiny bit of some of the behavioral science that comes around. I've tried to not, I said to Amanda today, I do not want to go down the theoretical rabbit hole, because you could spend your whole life studying one component of cognitive load that I will speak about today, and that's probably not where you necessarily need to be. But I'm going to introduce you to some ideas as to why, theoretically, we want to use video in our classrooms, why it's a really good idea maybe to sometimes create your own video, because you can pull lots of things from YouTube and you can pull lots of things from colleagues, but sometimes you need something that's sort of right spot on for that particular study group. So it's important to understand why you'd want to do it. And then my colleagues, Brian and Amanda, will give you examples of 2 models that they've used in the past. One is voice over PowerPoint, Do we want to record too?
It is already recording.
Okay. Testing 1, 2. You can hear me now? 1, 2? Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that for the online people. We're just fixing it up now, and we'll be back online in 5-10 seconds-ish. Is it very quiet?
That's because I turned it down because there was too much reverb.
Okay, that's on purpose, thank God. All right, let's go back. So I want to say thank you to and patience to everybody who is online with us. My apologies. We usually have a couple of other folks who turned out to be ill today. So unfortunately for us, a couple of small things like the computer going to sleep, turning off the sound is happening. So I'm going to start by talking about the pedagogical benefits of facilitating and having a video in your classroom and as part of your technology. So part of the reason for having having a reason for having video has a lot to do with facilitating thinking and problem solving. So if you think about it, the video helps your students pay attention. It facilitates the kinds of things that you want them to know, and it gives them an opportunity to look at issues or scenarios where they might be able to solve problems. So according to some research done by Shepard and Cooper and Mayer and Galliani, there's a connection between visual cues, so seeing things online, or through a video process, the memory process, and the recall of new knowledge. So I'll give you an example. When I was with the University of Saskatchewan, a colleague of mine did some work with vet med, and for 100,000 years, the training of veterinarians had to do with standing around a horse, if that was the animal of choice, and watching the vet do something to the horse that the person then had to go off and replicate. And so you can think about that. I mean, I watch it once. Maybe if I'm really lucky, the situation will occur a second time, which will allow me to read a second time. Then I go off and read a book, and I look at some pictures, and then I have to perform this task on this horse. So we thought about it, and we thought, as instructional designers, why are we not using video? Why are we not having the students able to watch it from different angles, see how it functions, maybe use some animation to figure out what's actually happening internally, because you actually, funny enough, can't see inside the horse. And what that created was a whole series of, at the time, DVDs, that facilitated problem solving, that actually allowed the new vets that were coming through the system to think about how they might put a hose down the throat of a horse that needed to have this done to them. So rather than sitting there trying to figure out, look around everybody, and the horse was moving and not happy with this work being done, they were able to have these kinds of visual cues, which in fact affected their memory because they could watch it over and over again, which then created new knowledge, which they were then able to go out and replicate. So if you're thinking about it in your classroom, these are some of the reasons why you might think about it. So it also assists with mastery learning. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of mastery learning is basically the idea of mastering something. I know, it just sounds really simple, but it's true. So if you think about online gaming, for example, or gaming in any way, you can't move to the next level of a game without mastering the first level. So you collect your treasure, and you kill the bad guys, and you rescue the good girls and guys, and then you wander up to the next level. And mastery is what creates that learning. So getting students from novice to expert in the field that you're interested in having them think about, video is one of the best ways to do that. So it allows you to use moving sound and images to communicate a topic that is engaging and insightful. It also enables students to acquire a range of transferable skills in addition to filmmaking itself, which is actually physically something that they learn, a skill that they learn. And these include research skills, collaborative working skills, problem-solving technology, and organizational skills. So if you think about using technology both as a tool of knowledge, but also as a way of creating that knowledge within the minds of the students, so having them use video to create something. So for example, in the work that you do, Tom, if you were saying out in workplace wellness, and you were saying to yourself, okay, I really want students to understand how wellness impacts the day-to-day operation of the job. An assignment might be to send students out to interview somebody else using film, using a camera, using their cell phone, which literally has, you know, some of the strongest technology that you could possibly have. And that not only creates the mastery from the point of view of understanding and connecting with the subject, but also by creating the work that they put together in that assignment, they've actually then done a double dose of mastery, because they've started to sort of see all the subtleties, because they've looked at the video with a different lens, with a different way of thinking. I don't know about you, but inspiring and engaging students for me is one of the reasons why I like to teach. And there's strong evidence that using video in your classroom does that. It increases student motivation. It enhances the learning experience. There's some suggestion you can get, your marks can go higher if your students are actually able to see the things that you're asking of them. There's a development potential for deeper learning on the subject, potential for a deeper understanding, and also some development of learner autonomy. So it allows students to sort of start to reflect, internalize, think about how they might work with the materials. And then authentic learning opportunities. So depending on the work that you're doing, whether it's in HR, whether it's in occupational health and safety, whether it's lawn planning, or any of the other kinds of programs that are offered here at Extension, it's an opportunity to hear and see authentically somebody's view of what's happening, or a situation, a case that might be of importance to them. So it allows the student to actually immerse themselves. And we can talk a little bit more later on about other kinds of immersion. But video is that sort of first level of getting to see what it might mean for them to be working in a workplace where they have to think about a certain kind of situation that they might face in their learning. So what could be effective educational videos? So we're going to talk a little bit about what components make up effective videos. So cognitive load, and we're going to talk a little bit about intrinsic, germane, and extraneous cognitive load. You didn't think you were going to get this exciting about things today. Student engagement and active learning. And you'll hear this concept of active learning throughout the whole process. Because although we think sometimes a video is being quite passive, in actual fact, it does have some opportunity to create some activity within the learning space that the student is in. And so it does, used correctly, it can give you some really engaged learning that might take place for your learners. So I'm going to wander down this cognitive load path for just a little bit of a minute. So cognitive load, in my words, it's pretty understandable. And it took me a couple of years. Sometimes in education classes, people wander down these paths, and you think to yourself, okay, just simple language, please. Could I have it in sort of simple language that makes me understand? So first of all, the main idea with cognitive load is reduce the extra material so you can maximize the space in the working memory of your learners so they're free to focus on issues that are important to the learning. That's your basic definition of cognitive load, interestingly enough. So if you think about cognitive load in the three topics that I talked about just a moment ago, intrinsic, germane, and extraneous. So intrinsic, it's inherent to the subject under study. So it's the ways in which the material that you're talking about, whether it's interior design or whether it is some other thing that you're working on, fundamentally it is how are all of the materials connected. So for example, in language learning, a word pair might be low intrinsic value, whereas grammar is high. So if you think about your materials in terms of things that are basic for them to know, and as you move up through the scale, things that are really important for them to know. Then you have an idea of how important it is to connect the ideas within the subject. So connecting those ideas are intrinsic, cognitive load, intrinsic. So you're telling your students, here are the kinds of things that I want you to know. The second part, which is germane, is the level of cognitive activity necessary to reach the desired learning outcomes. So how do you make comparisons, do the analysis, elicit the steps necessary to master the lesson? So if you think about your 4-day classroom, you've actually started your 4-day classroom probably day 1 doing intrinsic. Here are the definitions. Here are the way they're connected. Here are the kinds of things that we're going to talk about over the next couple of days. When you get to germane, you're actually talking about what's necessary to actually become what it is that you're trying to teach that person to think about being. Whether it's an interior designer or an occupational health and safety specialist or an HR person, all of those kinds of things, you're starting to make these germane. They're part of the mastery of the process. And then the third one is extraneous, and everyone goes there, I'm telling you right now, because if you've got 30 years in your field, that's the first place you go. And I keep, as an instructional designer, saying to you, okay, pull back, pull back. In 4 days, they don't need to know everything you've learned in the last 30. Right? You need to pull back. Think about what it is that they need versus what it is that you think they need. So when you were beginning as a X, what did you need to know? What were the kinds of subjects? What were the kinds of information that you needed to connect? So when you're creating educational video, you're really trying to deal with these things. You're trying to deal with the basic connections. You're trying to deal with the things that bring them to mastery. But you're also trying to step back a little bit from the extraneous, so you're not piling them up with lots of nice to know things where they get confused and then they're not sure which direction they're supposed to go in. So those 3 areas are quite interesting. And so if you look at this sort of slightly blurred image that I have, you've got sort of 3 areas of memory. So when cognitive load walks into play, sensory memory, that's your verbal and auditory and visual and pictorial. So that's where the video sort of starts to stimulate their learning. It's sort of in that sensory space. But they only have limits in their working memory. There's only certain limits to what it is they can remember. What you've got to be able to do is get them through this and into long-term memory, because that's where they'll remember the kinds of things that you need them to know as they walk through the materials. So long-term memory is unlimited. Much as we like to think that, you know, the older I get, the less I remember. In actual fact, long-term memory, from what we can understand about cognitive load, is actually open. It's an unlimited database of space. So think of it as the cloud. Whereas that's your hard drive. So you've got something that's limited. It's only got 40 gigs. That's as much as you can manage at any one time. And again, that's important for you to understand when you're designing and developing video, because or any course materials for that matter, because what you end up with is a situation where you want to reduce the extra materials so you can maximize the space in which the memory, working memory of the learners is open, so they can focus on the issues that are important to the learning and move anything that you're teaching them into long-term memory. So funny enough, when you sit down and you create your lesson, you're doing this whether you know it or not. But it's nice to know it, because then you can actually do it intently. You can do it with intent as opposed to fingers crossed, we're going to get there. So how do you do this in video? So when it comes to cognitive load in video, there's a few things that you can do. So you'll notice that I created some keywords. So if you were creating a video for this class and you wanted to put up keywords underneath, it might be a good idea to put the keywords in a bold. So even if you have closed captioning, you might be able to put the keywords in a bold. Change their color, or use a symbol, because that's cueing or signaling. That's telling the student this is important. This is something I want you to pay attention to. Segmenting. Oh, this is my mantra. Keep those little babies short. The research actually says 6 minutes. I will give you till 10. But after 10, you're pretty much hit and miss as to whether or not someone's going to listen. So some of the early research that's been done in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, once you hit 10 minutes, 50% of the people that are watching it are actually going to have any memory. 6 minutes, almost 100% recall at 6 minutes. And then after that, it sort of disappears. I don't know what Abe Lincoln would have done at the time when he sort of had his 4 score and so many years ago. But fundamentally, had he talked for 2.5 hours, chances are they lost him after the first, 6.5 minutes. So remember to keep them short. Create pauses to annotate or prompt a question as they're watching. So as you're creating your video, make sure that you're actually in a situation where you're giving them time to think, to reflect, to take notes, because that's important. As you're watching the video happen, you need to make that connection between what it is they're seeing and what it is they need to ask you. Weeding. Again, remove interesting but extraneous information. It's distracting. So if you wander off on a tangent with a story, that's great. But if that story becomes embedded in the material that you're trying to teach, students can't tell if that story is important and they have to remember it, or if it's something extraneous that they can forget about and focus in on key things. So part of your job as an instructor is to actually make sure that you're keeping them focused on the kinds of things that you're interested in having them know about. Doesn't mean you don't have good questions, doesn't mean that you don't have great discussions or all those other kinds of things, but you keep going back to what's key. You keep going back to what's important. You keep going back to what they need to put into their short-term memory, which will eventually go into their long-term memory. Because if you fill it up with all sorts of other stuff, they're not going to know what you want. And the tests are going to look off, the quizzes are not going to make sense. They're going to walk out of the room, and I've done this myself on many occasions and thought, what the heck just happened? Like, it was really interesting to listen to this person's story about X, but how did it fit? Like, where was it connected? What were the key points in that story that I needed to know? So the story is important. It's just a matter of making sure that you weed it and you make sure that you segment it and signal it so they know where it is that you're learning. And finally, matching modality. Ensure that you match the audio with the visual. Okay, so animation and narration. Is that a connection? Is that a matched modality? If I were to have an animation with some narration, would that be a good match? Take a stab at it. Animation, so I got this thing happening, and then I got my voiceover saying, this is a thing that's happening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The answer is yes, because you're using 2 channels. You're using audio and you're using visual. So those 2 channels match. What about animation and printed text? So I got this little dancing thing going on, and then up comes words. Dancing thing, words. No, it's 1 channel. Because remember, we're talking auditory and visual, and although printed is visual, the 2 don't fit. So it's a bit jarring. So students will see that, and they will find only the visual channel, the little dancing thing, and they'll find the information is impeding the learning. What about a talking head only, like me? Am I a good channel? Do I match my audio with the visual? No. I'm actually just a talking head. It's not good. And then talking head with images sketched over the sound. So voice over PowerPoint, for example. So in that case, uses both channels, right? You can see the images that are happening. You can hear the verbal explanation of why those images are happening. So you've got a little bit of 2 things going on. So as long as you can get those 2 things happening, you probably have some pretty decent video. So student engagement, make it short. No longer than 6 to 9 minutes, likely to be a wasted effort, just saying. I mean, put all your efforts into it, make it your passion, your wonderful thing, and the odd student will watch it all the way through and understand it. But if you really want to make an impact, you might want to keep your stuff to about 6 to 9 minutes. If you do have a 25-minute video that you want to show, break it up into 6 to 9 minute segments. Break it up into smaller chunks. And you'll find that quite helpful. So according to some research done in 2014, and Goy, actually he was a grad student at the same time that I was at UBC, He examined the length of time students watched streaming videos in 4 MOOCs. So for you who are not familiar with a MOOC, it's a massive open online course. So that might be thousands of people all at the same time in a course watching videos and learning material. He analyzed the results from 6.9 million video watching sessions. That is a research project for you. Kill me now. They observed that the median engagement time was less than 6 minutes, at which point close to 100% of the students tended to watch the whole video. Although there were significant outliers, the paper does talk about that in a little bit. They found that as the videos lengthened, the student engagement dropped off, such as the median engagement time from 9 to 12 minutes was about 50%, and the median engagement time with a 12 to 40-minute video was less than 20%. So if you're putting videos up online and sending students home to watch them and they're, an hour and a half long and you're wondering why nobody's watching them, this might be a good thing to know that making videos longer than 6 to 9 minutes is likely to be a wasted effort. Use conversational style, and we're going to have some examples tonight of that style, and that is, I know it's not easy. You don't actually sometimes really embrace this idea of video being easy to do, but you really need to talk to your students. When you sit down with a little script and you're sitting in front of your computer and your video capturing your presentation, talk to them like they're the only one in the room. Bruce, you're the only one in the room. I really want to talk to you conversationally. There's so much I want to tell you about this course. And every single one of the people in this room, in that room, looking at me in that screen, will hear me say the same thing to them. So be conversational. Don't be too slow. In fact, if anything, move it a little long, a little quickly, because the engagement is increased with a slightly faster pace. So you have had faculty members where they just talk, and they're really slow. And I had one guy, he was a fabulous actor. I fell asleep in his class. It was the only time in my whole career that I've ever fallen asleep in someone's class. He had this beautiful, deep voice that just talked like it was sprouting Shakespeare. One of those calm voices that just put me right to sleep. Make the material feel like it's for these students in this class. So we all know video, to be effective, needs to be something you can use over and over again. You don't want to be sitting down and creating video all the time. But if you create something that makes the student feel like, oh my goodness, he created this or she created this video just for me, to make me help understand me, make me understand the help, it gets perfectly contextualized within the student's mind. And then, of course, match the modality, which also works as well. And finally, active learning. So ask lots of guided questions. So watching a video, just putting on the video and walking away is not really the point. The point is to sort of ask them lots of questions. So if you're creating your own video, ask them questions in the middle of it. Use that as a kickoff to your discussions if you're online. Use it as a kickoff to your discussions if you're in a classroom. Ask the questions. What did you think when you saw that? What did you think when that HR person had to do this? What did you think when that person who was an HR person talked about how hard it was to do Y? What are the kinds of things that can make those guiding questions really important for the student? You can use interactive features that give students some control. And one of the reasons why video is so important in some venues is that it can flip your classroom. So who here has heard of flipped classrooms? Okay, so flipped classrooms are literally what it sounds like. The classroom is flipped. So if you think about it, 90% of the classrooms are me talking at the students and sending them home to do something. But when they're home and it's 9 o'clock at night and the kids are in bed and they've just settled down to do their work, no matter how nice their notes are, they can't remember what it is that you actually told them they had to do that night. So you flip the classroom. The lectures are all video. You send them home to listen to your beautiful dulcet tones at 9 o'clock at night. And the next day, when you're actually physically working through the materials, you're there to answer their questions. It literally flips the classroom. That's a simple concept. It's more complicated than that, but that's fundamentally what it does. It takes a classroom and twists it upside down. So that can allow you incorporate things and interactive things in the videos at night, which will allow the students to come back the next day and start to ask the kinds of questions and think about the kinds of materials, because they've started to move their ideas from sensory memory into short-term memory, and now as you talk it out, you're moving it into long-term memory. And then make video part of the larger assignment. This is something that a lot of instructors are quite surprised by. I don't know about you, and Extension, thank goodness, does not do this a lot, but you know, that last paper that nobody's ever going to read except you and the person who marked it, that's disappointing, because you've done a lot of research, you've thought about a lot of this, you've really tried to come up with new ideas, and the only person who gets to see it is the instructor and you. If you ask the class to think about creating video, and I know that's a little more difficult in a 4-day class, but it might be something that you might think about in one of the larger times classes, ask them to have it as part of their assignment. Go off and talk to a person in your field that you're interested in talking about, or create some kind of scenario between you and a couple of people in your class that will actually allow you to bring that idea back to the class and allow some teaching to take place that you've created. Just by simply getting them to do the work as well, consolidates that short-term memory to long-term memory. And I'll tell you right now, you'll go back to a student from 5 years and say, do you remember that last assignment in Kevin's class? And they'll go, oh my God, yes, I do. That was so much fun. And they don't even realize they've learned something. Whereas if I go and say, do you remember that paper you wrote for Diane? No, I don't. And so it's another way to sort of engage them, to get them to think about the way they might want to engage. So last, my colleagues, I'm sure, she's not going to take that much more time, is she? Here is the summary. Keep the videos brief and targeted on your learning goals. The more they're focused on the learning goals, the more they're connected to the key points and the main areas, the more they're likely to put it in short-term than long-term memory. Use audio and visual elements to convey appropriate parts of an explanation. Make sure they're complementary rather than redundant. Use signaling to highlight important ideas or concepts. And I know it sounds simple, but just simply underlining something or circling something when you're creating your video. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but I use a program that's on an iPad called Explain Everything. And it's literally a whiteboard with a voice. And so I can pop up a PowerPoint slide, and then I can write on the slide or circle it or point. So as I'm talking about that issue, it's literally something that I can physically have them see me engage with while they're watching. So that's signaling. Use conversational, enthusiastic style, because you want them to think, gee, I really want to learn from this person. Gee, I really want to have an idea as to how to be in a career that this person has. Doesn't mean you have to be a song and dance kind of girl, because I am. That's my natural personality. You can be much quieter. You can be all sorts of other kinds of personalities, but you need to be conversational and enthusiastic, because even if you're a quiet person, your students will pick up on how much you love what you do. And that really makes a difference into how they engage with you. And then finally, embed videos in a context of active learning. Ask questions, interactive engagement with the elements, and maybe associate homework assignments with the process. And you will create really fabulous video. So thank you. Here's my contact information if you need me. And I just thought I'd add a little funny. And then I just hit delete. I haven't actually eaten any homework for years. Good old tech. Here are some references for you to check out. All of these slides will go up on our PD website, as well will the audio, as well will be the handout, which I am going to hand out now. So thank you. Anybody have any questions? No? Good. So this is a handout. I'm walking away from the mic. This is a handout that I am going to hand out to you. You'll see the word kids, because it actually is a handout that's sort of more K-12 than it is adult. But everything that's in here makes sense if you just replace the word kid with adult. Well, that's what I think. I know I'm kids.
Good, Diane?
Thank you.
Good? Thank you.
Oh, and don't forget, anytime you have any questions about any of these things, just come see me. If you're interested in putting together, even if it's just an introductory video that says, hi, my name is, and this is the class you're going to be in this term, and this is how we're going to function. See, even something as simple as that can really make a big difference.
Great foundation for what Amanda and I are going to talk about here. So thanks, Diane. That's great. So what I'm going to show you today is how to do voiceover PowerPoints. So we're all very familiar with PowerPoint, I'm sure, and we all have it on our computers. Students probably have it as well. The voiceover PowerPoints is a really easy way for you to create simple videos for your students. You just need a working mic. You don't need a camera to film yourself. You just need a working mic and PowerPoint. And most of your students are going to have the software as well, so they can access it too. So inside of the classroom, when you're giving a face-to-face lecture, you're providing the voiceover for your slides in that context. So the real value of this tool comes when the students do go home, and then Dan talked a little bit about it. So when they're at home and they're studying, if there's something that is a really complex idea or issue that you want to expand on, students may want to go back and listen to something, a further explanation. That's where a voiceover PowerPoint would come into play. They can access it at home, access it in time, they can stop the video, replay it, all these kind of things. So as we're going through, I want you to think about how you may use something like voiceover PowerPoint in your course. Now, first I'm going to show you a couple examples of extension courses that use voiceovers. Bruce, you recognize this slide here? So thanks for letting us show it. Let's just watch this one quick, and I'm going to show you another one after this as well. So we're going to go here.
Welcome to the Construction Estimating course. This course is part of the Construction Management and Administration Certificate Program presented by the University of Alberta, Faculty of Extension. This course is about estimating costs for construction projects. We will talk about various types of cost estimates, the procurement of construction services, which may be by competitive tender or negotiated.
Okay, so this course is going into a completely online class. Bruce, do you want to talk a little bit about how you made this and the challenges?
Well, this is probably about the fourth or fifth take.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if I did this one on my Surface Pro in an empty classroom or if I was sitting at my desk at home.
Mm-hmm.
If it's at home in furnace, you can tell that.
Yeah.
It was a minimum of equipment. Surface Pro's got a microphone built in. I just used that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went and bought some Apple headphones with a microphone in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty simple setup, isn't it?
Yeah. The content is based on a face-to-face course.
Mm-hmm.
And so the introduction was basically scripted from the notes for that course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've taught that course many times. So
Yeah. Let me show you another example of a voiceover. Now, this one uses Screencast-O-Matic, and Amanda's going to talk about that as well. But this one is a very similar thing where instructor is commenting on the slides. So,
where we will continue to discuss improving the land use bylaw. Continuing on from video 2, let's move on to discuss moratoriums and how they should be addressed within a land use bylaw to make them most effective. A moratorium, simply put, is a restriction on one's ability to submit a development permit or a application for amendment of the land use bylaw for a certain period of time. Section 640, subsection 5 of the Municipal Government Act permits a municipality to include provisions in its land use bylaw that prevent the resubmission of an application for development or land use bylaw amendment. First,
okay, we'll stop there. So there's a lot of really complex concepts and ideas in that planning of law. So the instructors have gone through and they've gone through a lot of explanations, and I think they've done an excellent job of their PowerPoints. So how do you do it? It's pretty simple, and I'll show you quickly how we can create these yourselves. So I'm just going to create a new one. And I'm going to add, this is your PowerPoint. You can import your own, obviously. We're going to create a couple new ones. And we're just going to add so we can distinguish them. Whoop. A little out of order. And 3. So we have our 3 slides here, and we want to narrate them. We're going to go to the first slide, and on the top we have a menu called Slideshow. So we'll click on that, and then there's a button here that says Record Slideshow. So we'll click that one on. We're going to start the recording from the beginning, and then when we hit Start Recording, the microphone on this computer, it's not very good. It won't pick up my voice really strongly, but we are recording now. So, and we're already moving on. So I'm just going to escape out of there, and I'm going to redo that. So we're going to record slideshow. And so we're on our first slide, and we're recording. You can see the numbers in the left up here, moving along. And when we want to move to the next one, we click on the mouse, moves to the next one, and we continue recording. And slide number 3 as well. So when we're all done, we'll hit escape, and we're out. And then we can just play it back. It's that simple.
We're on our first slide, and we're recording. You can see the numbers in the left up here, moving along. And we want to move to the next one.
Okay, pretty simple. Pretty simple. The nice thing about doing a voiceover on the PowerPoint is that when you go into, let's say you want to redo number 2, you can record the slideshow just for that one, and we can start recording just on number 2. So if you go through your slideshow, you did a great job on the first 3 slides. 4th slide was a little bit shaky. You can re-record your voice just for that one. Now on Screencast-O-Matic, it's a little bit more difficult to go back, and you may have to do the whole thing again. That's right, Amanda? Yeah. So that's the advantage of doing this. When you're all done with the slideshow, you can go into File, and then you can export it. So here you can export it as a video, and we can create the video, and we can export it as something called an MP4. Now you can also upload the PowerPoint presentation itself up into something like eClass, and then the students can access it then, but they have to have the PowerPoint program, obviously. As a video, you don't need that. It can just run right through it. Sound good? Any questions? Pretty simple.
Well, it is, but it's this part. So my question is, rather than bore everybody with more explanation, is that something that we can go through Leo and get more?
Absolutely. Yep. The Leo Learn at ualberta.ca. That's where everybody can come for these kind of help sessions. YouTube is also great for these kind of things as well. So I know I went through it really quickly, but YouTube or contact Leo Learn. Now, just thinking about your own courses, how might you use voiceover PowerPoints? I know, Veronica, you teach German.
Yeah, I have PowerPoints that basically explain grammar topics, or I use them in class and I'm doing the voice, obviously, in class.
Yep.
And so then I could actually just put my voice over it again so that when they want to review it, instead of just having the text, they can actually have my explanations as they go along.
Right.
I always give a lot more than the text that is simply on the PowerPoint itself.
What about using it for pronunciation practice?
Oh, for sure.
That might be useful as well. Other ideas that you may use it?
I can see using it for missed classes.
Missed classes, yeah.
Because I come across that all the time. Somebody says, what do I do? And up to now, it's been, study buddies, read the student guide.
Yeah.
This would be a really good way of doing that. Or even as a review for exams, more as a review prior to completing a large project. It's an ongoing project.
Right. I know in interior design, maybe putting up an image and explaining different concepts.
Well,
within
like
the
right,
image.
the course I'm doing right now is business practice.
Yeah,
So they're creating a business plan, so.
right.
And for a lot of them, it's totally outside their comfort zone.
Absolutely.
So this would help, do some explanation.
And as what Diane talked about, when students go home, they may not recall everything that was said in the classroom. And if they have a reminder, something they can go back to, it provides that little bit more support.
If I could interject for a second, because, and we've had this conversation before, there's a project that's coming through Extension right at the minute that I'm doing some work with, and it's on creating micro-learning. And one of the things, and it's focused on millennial students, so I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the students that are coming through your classes now are they seem to be getting younger and younger. And a lot of that age range, so mid-20s, early 20s, up until their late 30s, are millennials. That's sort of the group that they belong to. And the research is coming out. They've grown up with technology. They've grown up with video. They've grown up with audio. And it's a growing area where they respond to that level of access to the technology that you or I or even somebody in between them and us wouldn't necessarily go to as their first place of learning. So not only the idea of the classroom, as Brian said, going home at the end of the night, being able to listen to Rhonda's explanation of all of the terms again, and saying, oh, okay, because I didn't get it when she said it the first time. Now I listen to it over and over again, and that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or, sometimes it's just an introduction, a voice that's the PowerPoint that's sort of saying to me, this is how we're going to proceed through Module 6. And it's like, I know they said it day 1, but now I don't remember what we were supposed to do with Module 6. So sometimes it can be really simple to start out, and then as you get more complicated, as Bruce said, take 6. But it was really funny because he sent me the first take he did, and I said, this is awesome. Like, I love the sound of your voice. You've got a really nice pace happening, all this kind of stuff. And so sometimes don't listen to your own voice. I mean, recognize that you won't like it. But the students will love it when you give them sort of these things electronically.
So I have a question then about that. How do you, so you would pause between your slides, so one, and then you would just use the mouse wheel, and then you would pause and then do number 2, so that if they wanted to, they could just go to slide 2 and listen to
They
it.
could, yeah.
So the 6-minute rule that you're talking about is not relevant. If you've got 20 slides, you're not going to do it in 6 minutes unless you're an ever-ready writer.
I think, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's relevant in the bigger picture. So I don't know if you noticed, but the lawyers, there was a 19-minute slot, 19-minute video. And no, they changed slides, thank God. But these guys were amazing, and I sort of didn't say a lot because they had come into the room with, we're never doing video, not on the table. And I managed to talk them into a couple of videos. And when I turned around, literally turned around, there was 27 videos in this course. Because once they got started, they started to realize everything they could do with it. And so some of them got a little out of hand, but most of them are in the 10 or 11 time range for that one.
But they're really good presenters, and Bruce, your voice is clear, and it's a really good presentation. And that's something you may have to practice a little bit and work at, so that's great. I want to move on to Amanda here. We're running to the end, sorry.
Hi,
guys. Any questions, Leo Learn, and you can contact us.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for coming. If you ever need a tutorial, you know where that is.
Maybe you need to update your video still. Come on over.
All right. So my colleague Alex was originally going to make this present today, but unfortunately he fell ill, so here I am. You get me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something called Screencast-O-Matic. And it's another alternative to using PowerPoint. PowerPoint can be really fantastic, if you want to be recording things kind of in sections, can be really, really helpful, especially if you have a course where maybe some of your content will change out from term to term. So for example, maybe you've got a lot of legislation that you're dealing with in your course. Instead of having to go through and re-record your entire video, you can just focus in on one slide and then you're good to go. Screencast-O-Matic, it's kind of a one-shot thing. So again, you want to make sure that you keep it nice and short. But for all the reasons that Diane mentioned, I mean, there's no problem with that anyway. So to get to Screencast-O-Matic, I'll also point after the session, sometime tomorrow, probably we'll email everybody out with a copy of the recorded presentation, a bunch of handouts and stuff. So I'll send you some stuff there. But we are going to go to Screencast-O-Matic.com. And Screencast-O-Matic is pretty fantastic for a couple of different reasons. It's free, which is super awesome. And it also has a very, very, very low learning curve, which can also be great. The planning law folks that Diane was talking about actually use Screencast-O-Matic. So just a true testament to, man, I really don't want to do this, but it's so easy, so now I can do so many different things. So
I'm just going to add to that.
Oh, yeah.
The Center for Teaching and Learning on Main Campus, this is one of the programs that they recommend for their faculty as well. And as I said, because it's free, you can buy the big version, and it has also some other bells and whistles. But the nice thing about the free version is that it limits you as to what you can do, which is actually kind of perfect because you can't record more than 15 minutes. After that, you've got to buy the big thing.
yeah, so as Diane said, if you're interested in learning more about the different plans, those do exist, but you probably don't need them. In fact, you can even sign up, but you don't really need to do that either because you can actually start recording for free by hitting this button right here. So we'll do that. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to launch the free recorder. Now, if you haven't run Screencast-O-Matic on your computer before, it will give you a bit of a launcher, so you'll have to go through that, but that's pretty easy. I've already put that on this computer, so we are just going to open her up. And just a couple seconds here. Okay, perfect. So we're already ready to go. We have everything that we need. So you'll notice that you can record a few different things. You can do your screen. You can do your webcam, which will give you a picture of yourself. The other thing that's kind of cool is you can do both. So you'll have your screen that you're working from, and then you'll actually appear down here in the bottom corner. So,
and that has some advantages, because sometimes especially if you're teaching at a distance, the students like to see you as well, and they like the idea of being able to talk.
Yeah. So again, depending on what your purpose for the video is, will dictate kind of which one of these might be more appropriate for you. So for example, if you are just trying to walk students through a website or how to use eClass, for just as an example, you might use just the screen because all you care about is the actual pointer and where it's going and all that kind of stuff. Webcam might be super handy if you are even just posting like an introductory video. Hey, my name is Amanda, welcome to the course. These are the kinds of things that we're going to talk about. I would actually super recommend doing something like that in your course. In an online course, it's really great because it will actually give you that presence that you wouldn't otherwise normally have. And students really like to know that, hey, there's a real human being on the other side, as opposed to just like a little chat thing. Even if you're not teaching online, if you're doing a blended course or a web enhanced course, if your eClass course goes live, maybe a couple days before, again, a really good opportunity for you just to kind of say, hey, I'm going to be your instructor. These are going to be some of the things that we're going to talk about. This is my passion, like really excited to get move on this journey with you. So a couple of different things that you can do. And then of course you can have that both. So if you're doing, let's say you have a bunch of slides and you're speaking to those, it could be nice just to have yourself there. One of the things that I think a lot of people forget is you actually communicate a lot through your gestures. So if you're teaching any material that you tend to do this with, again, it just kind of adds a little bit of personality to your presentation. So for the purposes of this, we're actually going to stick with both. You'll note here that there is an option to set your max time. This is a free version, so it caps out at 15 minutes, which Diane said, not a bad thing. So run with that. In terms of size, you also have a few different options. So right now, my entire screen is being captured. If you wanted to have a smaller screen, you would just pick a different size. So here you'll notice that there is a little boundary there. Whatever's in that boundary is what's going to be recorded. So if you are working, let's say you're walking students through an interface of some kind, and you only want them to see just this little bit instead of like all of your browser tabs and all that kind of jazz, you can make sure that you restrict that so it's a little bit easier. You can also move this around, and you can also make it smaller and make it bigger. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to stick with full screen. And then you've got your narration. So basically, make sure you have your microphone hooked up. If the program is picking up your voice, you'll see those green bars kind of go back and forth. You can see in the right-hand or left-hand corner there. Computer audio is basically just whether or not you can add like an audio file to your presentation. Again, not something that you can do in the free version, but I mean, it's free. So when you're ready to get started, all you need to do is hit record down here in the left-hand corner, big red button. It will give you a nice little countdown so you know exactly when you're going to get started. So here I am. People who are viewing my video will be able to see my screen as well as my picture in the bottom left there. If you have a PowerPoint presentation, which I do, it's kind of cool. Make sure you have this set up before you hit record. And my button is underneath my...
You'll notice as Amanda's putting this all together, the number is still counting in the corner.
Yeah.
Which means it's capturing her putting it all together.
And if you find your picture is in an inconvenient location, you can move it around. So here you go. So this would be, again, me doing basically my voice over PowerPoint. We'll go to the next slide, we'll go to the next slide, that kind of thing. We're going to end our slideshow. And I do want to show you one other cool thing before I stop the recording. It might be a bit of a long recording, sorry. If you are walking someone through an interface, it's really cool too because Screencast-O-Matic will actually capture like your clicks and things like that as well. So if you're clicking through different links, you'll actually be able to see those links in the recording. When you're done, you'll hit the stop button, again, bottom left corner. And you'll notice here we have a total recording length of 1 minute 24 seconds, and we're going to hit done. So this will give you a preview of your recording. There are a few different options that you can take advantage of if you're interested. One of them is you'll see that there is a little music note here. If you click on that, you'll actually get an opportunity to put like a music overlay on your presentation. It does just randomly pick 3. So it's kind of luck of the draw. You might get one time you do it, and then you'll get another one another time. So that's an option. We're going to go with some...
Just remember extraneous, folks. Just
Yeah.
remember extraneous.
Yeah.
If it's of value, use it.
But you can also...
Want to do dramatic? Put dramatic.
You can also get a preview of what this stuff sounds like, right? One of the things that I find really cool about this as well is you can actually add captions, which is super fantastic when you're talking about things like accessibility. A lot of people will think of accessibility just in the terms of, you know, being unable to hear. So, you know, having something like subtitles might be really fantastic, but, you know, there are other situations where these kind of accessibility features are also really handy. So, for example, if you are teaching English as a second language, or any language actually for that matter, because what it allows students to do is actually see what you're saying as well. It's also really handy, you know, if you're reviewing a video and let's say it's like, I don't know, 11:30 at night and you're just doing it because you have to right now and class is due tomorrow. If you need to rewind, or if you didn't quite catch something, maybe in that point of the recording, the speaker's microphone kind of fell or something like that, or there's inconsistent audio, having something like a caption also makes it really easy for people to identify what it is that they may have missed. So we're not going to talk a lot about how to create caption files, but I'll just show you kind of what it looks like. So I'm going to add captions, and I'm going to add them from a file. And I have this captions file that I created in advance. So I've uploaded those. So next step, we've added all the music that we want to. We've got our caption file in there. Next, we're going to save it as a video file. So here you'll have, again, a bunch of different options. I always recommend MP4. MP4, you can access it from with anything. It's very similar to kind of a PDF. File name, just put something in that makes sense to you. So I'm just going to do it. Kickoff. Hit enter. Folder is automatically going to save to probably your desktop or your downloads folder. So just make sure you know where you're saving it before you save it. And then this is that cursor that I was talking about. So you have different options. By default, it's that highlight cursor. So if you clicked anywhere in your presentation, it will give you kind of like a, I don't even know how to explain that. You'll get to see it, so that will make more sense.
You get a pop-up. You get a pop-up. So.
Yeah, exactly. If you just did like a voiceover PowerPoint kind of thing, you might want to change it to no cursor, otherwise that's just going to be distracting. Again, it's that extraneous information that you don't really need.
They're following the cursor around and they're not listening to what you're saying.
Okay, so then it's just a matter of hitting publish, and it gives you a little progress bar. And I did mine a little bit longer than I expected because I was explaining things as we went, so just bear with me for a moment.
So both of these tools, you could say to yourself, well, it sounds really complicated, I got to remember all this stuff. But quite frankly, if you do it 4 or 5 times, by the 5th time, it's in your long-term memory. Trust me, you will remember all of the bits and pieces. One of the things that you also can take full advantage of, funny enough, is video. If you typed in Screencast-O-Matic introduction video, I swear to goodness, there's probably 25 million on the web right now that you could find that somebody in their basement has created a click this kind of thing. So you're never alone. And when you're really, really feeling like you don't know what you want to do, but you know you want to do something, that's when Leo comes in, and you can come in and have a chat with me about maybe why you want to do it, with Amanda about how you want to do it, Brian about how you want to do it, and then basically we can give you cheat sheets and all sorts of steps that you can go through.
Also a good opportunity to kind of show, there's also tutorials here. So if it's 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday when you can't reach us, you can access those. Of course, we're here during the day. So that's all there is to creating a Screencast-O-Matic video. So here we're just going to take a look. I saved it to my desktop. So here it is.
Exactly when you're going to get started. So here I am. People who are using my video, they can see my screen as well as my future.
And I don't know if you can see, those captions are actually along the bottom here, which is kind of cool because they're not actually sitting on top. So it keeps all that visual space open.
Bottom left there. If you have a PowerPoint presentation.
And then you can see the clicks. I don't know what you want to call them.
It's kind of cool. Make sure you have this set up before you click record.
And then just, yeah, the example of the PowerPoint.
We'll go to the next slide.
Now, because of the way my monitor or my display settings are set up, that's why it's looking like this. If you have it set up normally, it will just display your PowerPoints full size. So just make sure that you know what your display settings are kind of looking like before you get started. So that's all I have for you on that. Yeah.
Well, how do the students access this? It's sitting on your desktop.
Yeah, so one of the best ways that I would recommend, so definitely go with MP4. And one of the things that I would recommend is actually putting it in your Google Drive. And once it's in your Google Drive, you can actually get a link and put that in your eClass. You can actually embed the video right in eClass. So you can come and talk to us and we'll kind of show you how that works. But the benefit of putting it in Google Drive as opposed to eClass is it basically ensures that you're not bogging down eClass. So students will be able to, if it's hosted through Google Drive, students will get a much cleaner playback of the video.
So fundamentally what happens is you load your video into
Google Drive, you put a link into your e-class, they click on the link, it takes them to the drive where they watch the video.
You have to give them permission.
I'm sorry?
You have to give them permission to access it.
Yeah.
This is where, but yes.
Anyone with the link.
And you can set it up so that.
Actually, you know, I can probably show you an example, actually, of exactly what this looks like. Because I'm actually logged into eClass. Bear with me one sec.
But again, none of this has to be done on your own while you're sitting there, as long as Amanda said it's not on a Saturday night, and I didn't even know to answer emails on a Saturday night. It's just a matter of sort of you planning out on Saturday night what it is you want, and calling us Monday morning and saying, how do I make this happen? And then we'll give you as much help as you need to get it done.
So this is an example, actually. So this particular video, we have actually uploaded into Google Drive, but we've actually grabbed an embed link that allows us to put it in directly into eClass. So students hit play here.
Welcome to Module 1.
You basically get the idea. You can actually view that content in eClass. One of the things that I also do as best practice is just make sure that you put a link to the actual Google Drive space as well, just in case for whatever reason the video is not rendering as an embed in their browser. So as long as you give them that link as well, they're always going to be able to access it.
One of the advantages of the Google Suite that the University of Alberta has access to is that, from what I understand, there's no limit to the amount of video that you can actually house in the space. Like there's an unlimited amount of space that's available to instructors and faculty. So it's a lovely space to put things in. And then if you're teaching over a couple of terms, you can have your videos sort of all in one place. You're pulling it out as you need it, putting it into your e-class as you need it, or even showing it in your classroom as you need it. It's all there, sitting waiting for you, and it's stored. There's no you have exceeded your storage. Send $5 million to this address.
Yeah, I know I myself I'm using several gigabytes right now, and several maybe more than just several. Yeah.
Is there any way that you can track whether the student has listened to the video or not?
So not through Screencast-O-Matic itself, but if you actually were to upload your video or embed it into eClass, eClass has actually a lot of metrics around tracking. So you can actually, if you're using eClass, see whether or not a student has actually clicked on a link to view it. Now, the only catch is you won't be able to tell if a student has actually viewed the entire thing. It's just kind of, did they click on it and get started? So that's, again, when that making sure your videos are nice and small is going to come in handy, because if you're a student, and you're not going to want to maybe sit through a whole 30-minute video. Whereas if it's only 6, you're like, yeah, I got time. I'm waiting for my oven to preheat or something like that, or waiting for your bus. Yeah, eClass definitely has a lot of different tools that you can actually utilize to track that kind of information. Which actually makes another good point. Everybody on our team is actually really, really well versed in using Google Drive. So if you have any questions about putting your videos on Google Drive and maybe have questions about how to link to them in your eClass, you can definitely come and ask us and we can provide you with that information. leolearn@ualberta.ca. If you email that email address, you will get in touch with one of us. It's our team email, so even if you're trying to get in touch with me and I'm not there, Brian will be able to pick up your question, Kim will be able to pick up your question, so on and so forth. This is actually a really good tie-in to kind of the end of the session. Before I get to that, though, does anybody have any other questions related to Screencast-O-Matic, or why you might use it?
There's hundreds of tools out there to do this. We've just shown you 2 that we think are the simplest and the most effective for the kinds of things we think you might want to do. If you came to us and said, well, I want to do this, then we might be able to come back to you and say, okay, these 2 might be too simple for you, let's look at some other options. So one of the nice things about the way our team is set up is that I can sit down and talk to you about why you want to do it, and even the benefits for doing it, and the ways to craft the materials that are in it. And then my other colleagues can talk to you about the technical side, how to actually make, this sing.
So that's the free version, probably all you're ever going to need. If you do go with the paid version, you can get access to things like editing tools, but I mean, if you're just doing a quick 6-minute video, you're probably going to get all that kind of sorted out right from the get-go. So just something to be aware of. Right on. Okay. So thanks everybody for coming out. It's been great to see everybody again, see some new faces. Just a reminder that we do lots of events like these. So at the beginning of January, at the beginning of September, we have our kickoffs. We also have a bunch of different workshops that we have. I'm also going to direct you, if you haven't seen this already, now is a great time to make note of ext-leo.ca. This is our website, and there is a whole ton of information. There's a whole schwack of information that you'll find really handy. So if you go into professional development, for example, you'll be able to see when our upcoming workshops are. One of the other things that our team does is we publish a newsletter a couple of times a term, 2 or 3 times a term. So you can access the current newsletter here as well as all of our past stuff. All of these sessions, when permission is granted by the presenter, are recorded. So we also have all of those in our recorded workshops area. We also have an instructor handbook. Has everybody seen this before? Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay. This is something that our office publishes every year, annually. So if you ever are in need of an up-to-date copy, you'll always find the instructor handbook available online as well. Lots of really important contact information, really important policies, information about how to get set up for your course, all that kind of stuff.
Checklist on things that if you're walking into your classroom for the first time, a checklist of all the things you think about for that class that you're about to teach.
Yeah, exactly. We also have a bunch of information on here about how to use eClass. So a lot of tutorials. Of course, you always have us as a resource as well, so don't forget. You have access to an instructional designer who is absolutely fantastic. If you have questions about, whether your course is flowing really well, or maybe you have assignments in your course that are just not hitting the mark, Diane will be able to help kind of solve those kinds of issues as well. So we're here as a support resource. Do make use of us. Between the 5 of us, we have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and our job here is to support you. So definitely make use of those. Okay.
All
right.
Any final questions before more pizza? No?
I've got a couple more technical questions that I can ask.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. We appreciate the time.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our online participants. We always have a few people who can't make it in, and so it's nice to be able to do this by distance.
Yes.
Well, pizza for us. That's a lot of pizza. We're bringing home pizza.
Did you stop the recording?
Already have my share.
Thank you. Nope.
I would like to be able to use this video over Excel spreadsheet.